We got part two of Patron Richard's request with Brian May. This actually has been a good interview, to be fair. Like, it's good, and I think you can. I think interviews are much better when the person being interviewed actually likes the person interviewing them, if that makes sense. Like, I can feel in this that Brian does like this guy. Like, he's complimented him quite a lot throughout this interview. And I find that when people are with people that they actually like and actually respect, it you just get a better interview. To be honest, you get a more real interview. But anyway, yeah, part two. Let's go.
Get that genuine room sound,
I've
which
gone
you
back a little
cannot
bit.
really reproduce.
No, you can't
no
fake it.
substitute.
You can't
No,
fake
it
it with
has-
reverb. There's something about
No.
having the room react and having the microphones in the room that's so important.
Totally. Yeah. So that's it. We wandered off topic, didn't we? But it's all fun.
On your first solo in Bohemian, did you have the idea for the solo just from listening to what Freddie was playing during the solo section? Did the melody idea just come to you?
Yeah, I had ample opportunity because I'm sitting in the control room, listening to them do it over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I said, I think we talked about solos. I don't know how the thing came up, but I think Freddie said, what do you want for the solo? What do you need? And I said, I would like basically a piece of a verse. I want to be joining in and taking the story a bit further. So I want a verse pattern, and so they built that into the backing track. And yeah, I could hear it in my head. And I'm sort of, I come from a strange place. I come from a world where Mantovani and the Laughing Policeman were in the hit parade. So my melodies are not really rock melodies as such. I could just hear something very sweet and melodic, which seemed to be a continuation of what Freddie was doing, telling his story in the vocal. That might sound pretentious, or it might sound plain stupid, I don't know, but I hear always hear the solo piece as part of the vocal. It's just like the vocalist hands over to somebody momentarily who's going to continue the story and then give it back to the main raconteur, who's the vocalist.
The Deaky box. Can you tell me about that? What is that exactly?
I could probably even show it to you if we may be able to show you that. Deaky was a bit of a genius, really. He got a first class honours in electronics at Chelsea University about the time when I got my first degree and was failing my second degree, only to return 30 years later to get my doctorate. It's another story. But Deaky was very clever with electronics, and he found a piece of electronic equipment, which I think is a piece of a radio or something. Now, somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong, but it's a printed circuit board with some stuff on. And he thought, oh, that's a nice little amp. I'll hook it all up. And he found some speakers from a sort of local hi-fi thing, which was also in the skip, I think. And he put the two together, and this is it. This is a Deaky amp. So it says on there, I've written on. And it just sounds like nothing else, really. It saturates in a particular way, which is almost impossible to reproduce. We've had teams of crack scientists working on this for years. There's a great guy called Nigel Knight who's just about managed it recently. But I'm going to show you Pete, who's just put this in. Here he is. He looks after all my stuff.
Hey, Pete.
All right.
Pete.
Good to meet you.
He's Rick Beato. So this is the Deaky. And, it's another thing like the ambience thing. There is nothing which can reproduce this kind of sound that I have ever found. There's racks and racks of all these beautiful saturation things and compressors and phasers and whatever. Nothing sounds like this.
Okay, now what would that have been used on? Was that used on Bohemian on any tracks?
Yeah, it was used first by John himself, I think on Misfire, and he did that multi-tracking all himself. We just left him to it. And he used this amp, and I said, I can't remember what I said, but I started using it. I could make up a story, but I'm not going to. Started using it for my stuff. But I started using it on, well, I don't know when the first time was, but all that stuff in Good Company where I'm pretending to be a clarinet and a trumpet and a trombone. That's all the Deaky stuff. But I was using some volume pedals and wah-wah pedals for tone with that as well. But I've used it for loads of stuff, like the God Save the Queen track that I did, which is all multi-tracked. Fairy Fella's Masterstroke has lots and lots of little firefly guitars, all in harmony and stuff. It's all this thing, because it can sound like a violin or it can sound like a trumpet, depending on where you put the mic, very much, or how hard you drive it and what pickups you got.
What does it have? Just like a 6-inch speaker in it or something?
I think it's smaller than that. I think it's 4-inch speaker, probably. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's the original one right there.
Yeah, and there's nothing. I would use the treble booster, and sometimes, a wah-wah pedal, which I would set to a particular point to get a certain coloration rather than wahing, no actual moving, just using it as a tone control. But that was my setup, and it's very low tech, but my God, it works. And Deaky's been very kind enough to let me have it in perpetuity, because I did fall in love with it, and I used it for all kinds of stuff. Well, the other thing that I love about this was, one of its great moments, I think, is the solo in Winter's Tale. Mm-hmm. Talking years later now, the very final album that we made when Freddie had already passed away.
Yeah.
And I had that solo in my head, and I had this little amp in my head for about a year and a half, because all kinds of stuff happened. We were in such grief after losing Freddie, we just didn't want to look at the material for a long time. And then we came back in the studio, and I hadn't let anybody touch A Winter's Tale because it was such a precious thing. Also, Mother Love, those tracks, I just thought, I don't want anyone to look at until I look at them, because I know the way they should turn out. And so I plugged this in here in Allerton, in Surrey, where I am now. And having had this kind of tune in my head for all that time, all those months and months, started playing it through this amp, and it spoke to me. It was just like the sound of the mountains in Switzerland where the song was written, the duck house where Freddie used to sit and do his writing and relaxing. And it was, this amp has a definite magic to it. Yeah. Strangely enough, Steve Vais has been in touch with me. Steve, one of my favorite people in the whole world. Wonderful, extraordinary musician, and the nicest guy in the world, the greatest gentleman. And he's had a guy build something very much like the Deaky, and he's got his own logo merged with mine on it. And they're going to make me one, because they say it's great. So I'm going to swap him. I'm going to do him one of ours, and we'll compare notes.
This is
so I want to ask you about the vocal layering and the bouncing that was going on. So for the people that are listening to this or watching this that don't know about bouncing, I will explain it, but there's really nothing like this. You guys were on a 24 track, but there are so many vocal tracks, and you had to pre-mix all these layers of vocals.
I guess it's because we started off with 4-track and then 8-track and then 16-track, and we realized how precious the tracks were.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, when we made this record called Earth, I think it was on 4-track, and we had to drop the solo into the vocal track and then drop it out quick when the vocal comes back in, and you can hear it.
Yeah.
So, I have seen. You're never going to get rid of that drop-in sound. So we were very conscious that we didn't want to be dropping in on a track something foreign. Every track would be pristine and would only have that instrument on it. So having said that, like you say, you have to clear up as you go along, which means you have to make a lot of decisions as you go along, which you can't go back on.
Right.
So, for instance, you've already used up quite a lot of tracks on drums. I forget exactly how many. You probably have that in front of you. There's probably like 7 or 8 tracks for drums. There's guitars, there's bass, whatever. So you might have, I don't know, a dozen tracks left to play with to do the vocals. That's not very many if you're doing a lot of overdubs.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, we'd have it all mapped out. In the case of Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie's come in with his piece of paper with his little notes all over it. It's his dad's company note paper. And he's written like A, B, C, C sharp, F, whatever, for every line of vocal, because he's worked them out on the piano, which is something that we very often did. Just work out all the nice harmonies on the piano, and then you just steam through them. You'd like turning the sausage machine, play them on the piano, we learn it, we sing it. And generally the 3 of us would sing it at the same time. And for Bohemian Rhapsody, we kind of sang them in character. There's a kind of acting thing going on, because we're not going Bismillah, we're going Bismillah. We are sort of being these strange characters in the scenario which Bohemian Rhapsody is. So it's partly sort of Arabian, it's partly very English. No, we will not let you go, you know, and we're sort of being these characters, the three of us. So we sing the line and we make sure it's nice. And it's probably, well, maybe a couple of lines that we sing. And we listen to it and make sure it's all in tune and in time, whatever, we feel good. And the thing, like I said before, it's got to sound spontaneous. It mustn't sound like we're trying to get it right on the beat. It's got to be like, yeah, we're singing it on stage and the spontaneity is there. So we have the one track. We then sing it again. We double it, listening to the first one in our headphones. And we check that there's no nasty grating. It's roughly in tune with the other one. Not too much in tune, because I think you've been here as well. If you make it perfectly in tune, it's not going to sound big. It's going to sound
small.
So you there's a sort of reality about it. You sing it, and that happens because you're singing it with passion and spontaneity, and you do go a little bit above and below. So it starts to sound nice and fat. Then normally we do three. So you have three tracks on the tape machine, and each of those tracks has three voices on it. Now that's 9 tracks. So you're already getting a bit shaky. So you've got to get rid of that. You've got to just compress them down. So we would listen to them back, bounce them, balance or bounce, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Make sure they're all balanced up so you can hear them all equally, roughly. Maybe spread them throughout a stereo, bounce them to a stereo, or if you're really short of tracks, bounce them to the mono and hope that you can fix it, make things big later on. So that's one part. We would then do the same for maybe the next harmony line up, the next harmony line after that. Sometimes we would do octaves. So then each time we're bouncing them down, you're building up and building up. And sometimes you've got to bounce your bounce because and then you start, it's dodgy because there's a certain amount of loss in analog tape. It's a lovely sound, but you are losing every time. You're not cloning, you're actually losing some quality every time. And in the case of Bohemian Rhapsody, I'm sure you know this story, we started thinking, we're losing a lot of quality on this. We're losing all the top. Maybe we better put some top end back on this. Why is this happening? And then Roy takes the tape off the machine. The tape is 2-inch, holds it up to the light, and you can see through the tape.
Oh, so that's actually true then?
Yeah. So because the machine was faulty, to be honest. There was a piece of, I think it wasn't as smooth as it should have been. So it's going over the record head or the playback head, and a little bit of the oxide is getting scraped off each time.
Yeah.
And you can see a pile of kind of sawdust underneath the head. You can see this oxide, this brown oxide stuff, which is the piece of your music that you've just lost.
Yeah.
So what we did was we quickly copied the tape across and started again. I mean, not starting again, but started with a fresh piece of tape with the information that we had, because if we'd gone on any further, we would have lost everything. And of course, that gives you an idea, because later on we started doing that routinely so that we would have what we would call a slave machine.
Yeah.
So you can actually run these two machines in sync and effectively get more and more tracks. And that became a thing for a while. Of course, with analog, they wouldn't sync up perfectly, so you had to be a little careful, or things would phase when you didn't want them to phase. But when digital tape came along, I don't know, does anybody still know about digital tape?
I do.
Yeah, you do. Okay. Well, you get digital tape now. You can sync those up exactly. They will lock in. So you have effectively hundreds of tracks if you want, all on different bits of tape, all on different machines, and you have a sort of infinite recording studio. That's before things got to be digital in the sense of on hard disks instead of tape.
So Brian, if Pro Tools were around, right, back then, would you have made the same kind of music? Would you have made Bohemian Rhapsody like that if it were that easy?
Yeah, I think you just use what you've got in front of you and you use it to its best effect. And some of the stuff we could do in the early days, it's actually better than you can do with Pro Tools, I think. Pro Tools gives you an enormous amount of choice. Can't get away from that. But there are certain things you could do with the old analog stuff, which it's hard. There's a feel to it. Now, I saw your thing on tuning the other day, which is great. It's a magnificent piece that you did on auto-tuning and stuff and what it means in music and in Munich. Now, I used to do that before there was any digital stuff. There was a little machine, an analog machine called a Publison, French machine. You ever come across that?
Yeah.
And it did a lot of stuff, including phasing. But one of the things was a little pitch change. One little knob did pitch change. So if we had a great vocal and there was just one note in it which was a little sharp, so it made it sound weird, a little flat, I would run it through there and I would tweak the Publison when it came to that bit and re-record it on another track.
Yeah.
So effectively, I'm doing auto-tune. And this is 19.
Yeah, but you're still doing it by ear, though, Brian. That's
exactly. You've got a feel to it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So in some ways, it's better because you're listening rather than watching on the screen. Because that's a trap to fall into. You can believe what you're seeing, and it's not really what you're hearing, right?
Right.
We've all done that.
Yes.
You can test it. You can do it. We can all fool each other, and it's embarrassing, because people say, "Oh, can you just sharpen that note a bit? It's a bit flat." And they go, "Yeah, how about this?" And you see it happen on the screen, and you go, "Oh, yeah, that sounds much better." And then the guy says, "Oh no, actually, I didn't do it." And then you feel really stupid.
When I listen to the drum tracks, that you can hear that tape compression, the beautiful tape compression on the low end of the kick drum, on the toms. It sounds like nothing else. And this really sounds, you guys are hitting the tape hard. I can tell that.
And Roy was really into that. Yeah, it's not just the tape. I mean, there's a lot of compressors in there, the analog compressors. It's a whole chain of things, and the tape is the last compressor in the line, really.
Right.
But Roy was into really overdoing it, especially the snare drum. He just turned it up and up and up, and he'd go, "Well, that sounds nice and distorted, doesn't it, Neddy?" We go, "Roy, maybe a little too far there." You can hear it on some things, like the Jazz album. It's very extreme. But yeah, I'm a fan of the way tape sounds and always will be.
So, Brian, looking back on this, how many years later, 46 years later, Bohemian Rhapsody, do you ever go back and actually just put it on or listen to it? Or if it comes on in the car when you're driving, will you turn it off?
Oh, no, no, I won't turn it off. No, I'll turn it up because I don't get a chance to listen to it at home, really. I very seldom do that stuff. I started listening to my solo stuff just recently because I'm doing reissues. Yeah. And that was a revelation to me. And I just thought, I never sit down and listen to our stuff, really. If it comes on in the car, it's great. It's like being a kid. The first time you hear your record played on somebody else's radio is an enormous thing. It's like suddenly you've become part of the fabric of society. I remember waking up when we were mixing Night at the Opera, and I'd been working all night on the Prophet song, trying to get all these delays working and everything, trying to mix it. And I woke up and I could hear it. And I thought, am I imagining this? But no, Kenny Everett had given it to my neighbor upstairs, and my neighbor was playing it incredibly loud on his radio. So that's what I woke up to. And it was horrible, but it was also wonderful because I thought, oh my God, what we're doing is actually in the world. It's part of what people are experiencing right now. This is being welded into the...
Again, I think that's a magic that is lost today. Because it's so easy to be in the world. You just need to have the balls to upload something. But that's why I don't understand why people moan about how little money they get from YouTube or whatever, any streaming thing, whether it's music or videos or whatever. I find it odd that they talk about that they don't give you a lot of money. It's like, I'm a perfect example. Like, it's mind-blowing that people email me from all around the world. Like, most of my subscribers aren't from the UK. Like, and when you have people, like, I've had people from all over the world, and it's like, these people didn't these bands and these artists didn't have that luxury of being able to put your song up and it already being able to go around the whole world. Right. Although I bet that is still crazy, like, to hear your song actually on a radio, because I think even today radio still has a thing of kind of, because like I say, anybody can put a song online. That's not, even if it does a lot of views, I mean, that's good, but I think still artists. But then Noel Gallagher talks about that, saying that when he was younger and coming up, the dream was to be on top of the pops. That was what people aspired to be on, because every band, Queen and whoever else, has been on top of the pops. So when you was coming up as a British band, that was your right. Once we were on top of the pops, but he's like, but there isn't anything that's respected like that anymore. Where where young, like, I think he uses Transmission and an E4 music show. He's like, I can't really imagine bands, like young bands, being excited because they're going on that. He's like, but when Oasis went on Top of the Pops, like, so yeah, I get what Brian's saying, but I think, yeah, that the modern world, although it would still be crazy, I think, for people to have their song played on radio, but in the respect of having something in the world, it's so much easier to do now. Like, it's, yeah, but yeah, let's go.
Their lives at this moment. What an amazing thing that is.
Is there anything that you want to say or that you've never talked about in relation to this song?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, that somebody's never asked you before, that you say, this is kind of an interesting thing.
I'll tell you a little story about the end of Rhapsody. Now, the end, everything's coming down. It's coming towards the conclusion, and the guitars are sort of going da, 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 in harmony. And then the piano comes back in. Nothing really matters. Nothing really. And I remember soon after we'd done it, listening to it on the radio and thinking, the piano's gone out of key. What's gone wrong? Why is the piano sounding weird? It sounds flat. The reason is that I'd pushed those guitars too hard and edged them up. So the guitars were a little sharp. And so your perception is that the piano comes in too low, right? And it bothered me for years. And I didn't talk about it to people because it's a bit embarrassing. You know? I'm not embarrassed now. I don't care now. But when we came to remix it for the surround, the 5.1 surround mix, which I'm hugely proud of. I don't know if you ever heard that mix, but we did that.
I have not.
We did it in Los Angeles with the guy who mixed Frank Sinatra. I forgot his name. He's a wonderful guy. And Roy and some dear friends of mine. And we sat there for days mixing everything, redoing Bohemian Rhapsody so everything came from all around you. You've got to hear it sometime. And when it came to that bit, I thought, I'm not standing for this. So I got in and I tuned all the guitars and they're spot on. And now when the piano comes in, it sounds perfect. So that was a sort of circle that I had to complete. And it was very nice feeling for me to do that. So that's my admission story.
Well, I never noticed it. So,
well, if you didn't notice it, chances are not that many people did, but I did.
But that shows you how people, when they're actually making a record, those kind of things that they obsess about when you're the artist and it's your music, you hear things that other people don't hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Because I feel like that, like, and like I paint. My main job I've had throughout my whole life has been decorating people's houses, and it's the same kind of thing. Like when you decorate a room and people come in and you're kind of looking and you think, oh, it looks terrible, but then someone comes in and goes, oh, it looks amazing, but they haven't been as focused on it as you have. They're taking it as face value, whereas you can see, because you did it, you know that, like, maybe in that corner you didn't quite get up with the cutting in, but someone who just comes in and looks face value at it really does, like, they just, oh yeah, it looks amazing, because they just see the difference of what it was before. And it is the same with music, right? People take things, and especially if you haven't actually got an ear for music anyway, which most people don't have, like, it is a gift to be able to tune into music like that. Especially that deep. Like, I never noticed that, like, at all. But that's because I think as well, like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't notice that, but that's a real artist's thing. Like, if an artist isn't thinking that along them lines, then you might as well not be doing it. Because what was it? The Lars album, which is a great album. But it's a great album. That album, like every song on that album, even the bonus tracks of the Lars album. I think it's just called the Lars as well, self-titled, I think. But every track on that album's great, and it nearly never ever got released because Lee Mavers, was his name Lee Mavers, was just constantly like, no, it doesn't sound like how I want it. It don't sound right. to the point where he re-recorded things so many times that in the end the record company was just like, we're putting it out. However it is now, we're putting it out. And the album's great. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, but yeah, I like that. I love hearing as well because I love hearing things like that because you just like, when you listen to Queen, you just kind of hear like I say, you're not as tuned into it. So to hear him kind of go, if you listen, it comes in a bit flat. Yeah. But then also, what's great is the John Deacon making something like the fact that they were all so intelligent as well. Every member of Queen is like a genius in their own um, field, and I just love things like that because Jack White's another artist that he makes instruments and makes little gadgets and like he's got the thing for Icky Thump, Jack White, where you connect. He like puts his hand over two bits of copper or something. Like he connects the two bits of copper with his hand, and then that joins the mic and his guitar. Or I don't even know. It doesn't even make sense. But just to sit down and even think to do that is just genius. So I love that hearing like John Deacon using his real world skill of electricians, but even also talking about how they record and how complicated it is. It's like it's but then I suppose that's why Queen's songs sound so well produced even now. And it is crazy that like back in them days they had a 4-track and they're putting everything on a 4-track. Like, well, obviously, yeah, like then the 8-track come in, and then like you said, nowadays you can have as many tracks as you want. It really doesn't matter. So it's and I think like I say, it's a bit like old movies. Like, and why movies and things just don't hold up as well today because of CGI, and with CGI it becomes so easy to do things that you can do a lot by not doing a lot and kind of make it like seem, but no one has to care. No one has to care, and unless like you get something like 300, where you see how they use CGI in that, and you can see that someone that had used the CGI, but there was a real element of the person caring, and that's what I think older music just has. I think it's so easy to do things now that, and you can get away with so much. Like it's taken away the actual people giving a shit about what they're doing because it's so easy to make it kind of sound proper. Um, but yeah, you go back to them days where he's talking about, but like you said, it's like he was kind of auto tuning before auto tune was about, but you still needed to do it manually, not like, I mean, because let's be honest, you see some of these people that are singing now that have careers in singing, and male or female, they're there pretty much because they're hot. That's it. And you hear them sing without auto tuning, and it's terrible. But then yeah, that's just why I think. Oh, like to be honest, my music interest gets less and less as the years go on, and I do think it's because of that. I think it's just because in the old days they just gave a shit more. But I am enjoying this now. This is a great interview. This was a good request. It's even just him kind of dissecting the tracks. Like I say, it's out of the realm of what the average listener. Because I think I have a good ear for like music and that, but I've never. When it comes to that type of thing, I think as well because you're not actually listening out for mistakes when you're listening to a song. At least I don't. I more listen to things that I do like about a song rather than. But if you're actually creating it, then yeah, obviously it helps to have that mind that's constantly kind of picking the songs apart. But then also it goes to every artist, I think that you can. It comes to a point where you just have to kind of say, "That's that. I'm not working no more," because you got more chance of ruining something if you just keep adding and keep playing about with it. It becomes like you can go too in depth into it. But I'd love to actually hear that. I'd love, mind you, know, like I'm pretty sure you could probably find someone who could recreate Bohemian Rhapsody note for note, vocal note for note on a computer. Like literally, well, you see it anyway. You see it with people that like recreate hip hop beats or whatever, and you hear it, and they do because it's just like, yeah, I don't know, I don't like it. I like me some realness, especially with guitar music. With other genres of music, I'm not so fussed. But when it comes to guitar music, I like real guitars. I want to hear it. So I want to hear it sound like that's just some lads in their garage that have just wrote a great song. That's kind of the, the sound I like. And that was like something that, yeah, I liked about Queen. When you go back, and especially from hearing what you kind of know of Queen in their later years and that kind of big, but then you go back and they have this dirty rock sound. Um, yeah, but yeah, this is a great interview. This is a great interview. But yeah, that's part two. Sweet.